Hello everyone and welcome back to a new video in Introduction to the Finite Element Method. In this video we are going to basically dive into a small example in which we are going to calculate the stiffness matrix of a constant strain triangle, a CST element. Of course, this video is part of a larger series called Introduction to the Finite Element Method, which has a playlist that I will be linking on the top right. So with that being said, sit back, relax and enjoy the show. Alright, so a quick reminder of what we have done so far. So far we were dealing with the stiffness matrix, which is basically BDB multiplied by TA. The derivation of the stiffness matrix has been done via two previous videos. The first video 2 weeks ago was talking about the shape functions, and the video of the previous week was talking about the stiffness matrix. So this is basically, in a nutshell, what we were talking about in previous videos. We had the strain, we had the shape functions, we have the transformation matrix, and we have the local stiffness matrix. So the example we have here is basically taken out of the book Daryl L. Logan's First Course in the Finite Element Method. And in this example, he wants us to basically find the stiffness matrix and determine the element stresses. Of course, he's giving us nodal displacements, and he's assuming that those are in the local direction. He gives us elastic modulus, Poisson's ratio, thickness, and so on. If you check out the solution of this example in the book, you kind of find it being a little mathematical tussle, basically just applying alpha, beta, gamma, and so on, and just calculating a B matrix and multiplying BDB. I want to give a little bit more details about this, so I want to define and find the shape functions. Now this might sound pointless in the context of this example, but I want to establish this solution method because it might be relevant in other elements. So to start with, I want to find the shape functions, which are called Ni, Nj, and Nm. So those are also called, in my terminology, the mixing functions, because U, the displacement at any point x and y, equals Ni Ui, or N1 U1, plus N2 U2, plus N3 U3. So those n's are important to find the displacement within the triangle at any point inside this triangle if we are given the nodal displacements. Okay, so of course there is alpha, beta, and gamma, which have been defined in the previous videos. Alpha being some sort of triangular area, beta being the delta y but in reverse order, and gamma being the delta x in correct order. Now, this shape function is 1/2 area, and the triangle area is basically half multiplied by the base, which has a distance of 2, by the height, which has a distance of 2. Basically 4, of course, 1... Wait, what? I think my teaching assistant has messed up, because half by 2 by 2 is 2, not 4. So I think my team is not doing a good job right now. This is 2, of course. This here is correct because it's 1/2a, and if the area is 2, then it becomes 1/4. Fantastic. So those are basically the shape functions. N1 is a function in x and y, N2 is a function in x only, and N3 is a function in x and in y. So we can use those to find our strain. How do I do that? Well, remember that the strain needs epsilon in x, epsilon in y, and gamma. And if you remember correctly, epsilon in x is the partial derivative of u with respect to x, and epsilon in y is the partial derivative of v, which is the displacement in y, with respect to y, and gamma is a cross derivative, partial u to y, partial v to x. Now to do this is done by using the shape functions. Instead of finding partial u over partial x, I could replace that by partialing the shape function, because summation n multiplied by u equals u. So instead of partialing the u function xy, I could partial the shape function, which is still a function in xy. And that's the reason why I need to partial derive each of those shape functions once with respect to x, and yet again with respect to y. And that is what is happening here basically. Now with those known, I can construct my B matrix. Now the crazy part in this example is that the book immediately jumps into constructing the B matrix, but now at least you know the steps. Those steps will get relevant soon, not in this video, but I needed to go through all those steps because later I might go through those steps again and then you will see a difference. Allow me to give you a piece of foreshadowing here. You see, because we are dealing with the constant strain triangle, all the derivative of the shape functions are numbers. They are not something with respect to x or something with respect to y. This makes sense because the strain should be constant as per definition. Now, things will get obviously hard when we deal with non-constant or linear strain triangles. You haven't seen it yet, but your B matrix will not be this cool mathematical constants matrix. No, it will be a matrix of functions, of x's and y's. And this is going to be tricky, and we're going to deal with it in the not so far future. For now, enjoy the bliss that is the constant strain triangle. So we basically don't know that yet. So with our bliss of constant strain triangle, our B matrix is basically partial u to partial x, which is something something partial n to partial x, and partial v to partial y for our epsilon ny, which is something something n with y. And then of course the cross partial derivative of u with y and v with x for the gamma. Now those values get basically placed here, because, you need to multiply those by the u's, and you multiply those by the x's, and the last one is the cross product, as the crossing of both. Please refer to the previous video to understand why those look like this, why there are some zeros here. Okay, so I have my B matrix. Now this becomes a mathematical tussle and you have MATLAB to do that. The only reason why I went back 3 steps here is because in the future this will be relevant. For now, this is totally irrelevant, and the book actually doesn't even care. The book doesn't even care about all those steps. It just jumps immediately into the matrix here, which is, at the moment, acceptable. Okay, so we have our B matrix. We can construct our material matrix. I think it was a plane strain. Let me just check. I think he tells us what to determine. Let me just check. Assume plane stress conditions. So he's using the material matrix of the plane stress conditions, which be calculated here. And now the magic trick of MATLAB comes. You multiply B, I think it was transpose, B with D and with B yet again, which is happening here. Basically, a quick note that you should not forget those areas and thicknesses. So this is done in the book. Also, you can do it in MATLAB. Just throw in those matrices, multiply them, and don't try doing this by hand. I think now it's the time to basically start learning MATLAB. I don't know, I might start a series on MATLAB on this channel, but I'm kind of overloaded at the moment because I have the robot series and the ETAP series. I haven't touched that for a moment, but I wish I had more time. I would be able to do more videos. Alright, so with that being said, we have our local stiffness matrix, and you know the trick. If you want to find the displacements, you need forces. However, this is not an analysis example in the normal sense. In the normal sense, you would have forces, and you are asked to find displacements. This time he gives you displacements, so there are 2 options. He either wants you to find the forces, or he wants you to find the stresses. And he's asking for the stresses. Now, truth to be said, you do not need the stiffness matrix for the stresses. The stresses sigma equals the material matrix D multiplied by the strain matrix epsilon. And epsilon is basically the B matrix multiplied by the U matrix, because B converts displacements into strains because it contains all the partial derivatives. So truth to be said, you could have found the element stresses without finding the local stiffness matrix. The only reason why we found the stiffness matrix is because he's asking us specifically to do so. Now this will be of course different in the future videos, but this is our first example, so we need to take it easy. Okay, so I have my B, I have my D, I have my stiffness matrix, and the only thing that remains is basically just throw in some numbers. This is basically sigma, which equals, as I said, material by strain, which equals material by B, which is the displacement to strain transformation by displacement. You can see the multiplication happening here and the sigmas here. Now, this would be a very short video if I want to end it here. But of course, I have more to say on this example. Now, officially, the example has finished, but I am not finished. You see, I want to talk a little bit about this. Now, I want to start with the BSc level, go through the MSc level, and even finish with the PhD level, just in case if there are PhD candidates watching this channel, or even fellow associate or assistant professors. So let's start with the BSc level. The book goes a step further here. He finds you sigma x, sigma y, and tau, and then he does calculate something called the principal stresses via Moore's circle. Moore's circle is a tool that we used in the mechanics of material course to establish the maximum sigmas and the maximum taus on a given element. This is so far so good. But wait, how is this possible? Why is he using a Moore's circle on a triangle? Now for the BSc level, that's very simple. It's because those three stresses are the stresses of our triangle everywhere. Like sigma x, sigma y, and tau, those three values are true for any point on the triangle. Wherever you go on the triangle, sigma x is always going to be the same, and sigma y is always going to be the same, and tau is always going to be the same. Of course, you would think that's odd, and you're right, and I will elaborate on that in a moment. You would think it's odd, but well, those are the rules of the game, because you assumed a constant strain triangle, so your strain is constant on the element, which means that your stress is constant. You don't believe me? Well, here is a proof for you. You see, the stresses do not change, and they are the same, but why? Well, the answer is CST. Now, proof, take a look at this. This part of the multiplication is B multiplied by U. This is the strain matrix, and you can see that this is a matrix of numbers. There is no x coordinate, there is no y coordinate. Even if you want to find the strain at a point, say x equals half and y equals 0, you will get a number. You will get the same number everywhere, because there is no place in the B matrix to put an x in. There is no place in the U vector to put an x in. Basically, your strains are independent of the values of the coordinates x and y. And that's the reason why the strain is constant, and subsequently the stress is constant. That should make sense for the CST element. Now I want to go a step further with our MSc level. Now this proof might seem to make sense if you are an MSc level person, or you have exceptional engineering sense in BSc. You would think, wait a minute, that's insane. How can a triangle have the same stress everywhere? Of course, I would ask you, why do you think this is insane? You would answer and tell me, well, go back to the problem. If you go back to the problem, you can see that point number 1 is moving 0.025 in y, you can see this here, and nothing in x. You can see that point 2 moves in the x 0.012 and nothing in y. And you can see that point 3 moves up 0.025 and nothing in x. I would still ask you, okay, what's the problem here? You would tell me, look at this. This moves in total less than this. So it seems that the forces affecting point 2 are smaller than the forces affecting point 1 because it moves less. Okay, so what's your point, I ask? You answer and say, well, since the external forces, it seems, are smaller here, it should make sense that the stress here should be smaller than the stress there. I mean, why did point 3 move a lot? Why did point 1 move a lot? Well, the reason why they moved a lot is because there is a strong force there. And if there is a larger value of force there, this stress should be larger. Now, this is the insanity in our CST triangle. Because look, point 1 clearly moves more than point 2. You can see it here and here in comparison. So logically this means that the force should be higher, which should cause a larger stress. Well, what gives? That's a question you would ask as an MSc level student. And the answer is, well, once again, like the BSc, this is the CST element. And this is the limitation of the CST element. It is a simple element. You have constant strains, yet it is limited. And you can see the limitations by this illogical way of getting stresses, and that's a weak point in the CST, and that's why we have higher order, more complicated elements that are used, like quads and LST elements, which stands for the linear strain triangle. But still, thank you very much for raising this question, my dear hypothetical MSc viewer / high engineering sense PSc student. Now, for my fellow PhD and assistant professors, this is basically the power level of over 9,000 if you get the DBZ reference. Now, my teaching assistant wants me to do this joke. I don't know why. Okay, so for my fellow people here, I want to say the following. I want to give you a small little problem here. You see, there is something even crazier. Assume in a hypothetical that you are adding a fourth point here in the center of the triangle. I'm adding a point called point 4 in the centroid of the triangle. And of course, since I added the point, I can discretize my triangle into 3 triangles, as you can see here. This is called triangle number 1. This is called triangle number 2. This is called triangle number 3. Now, you could assume that the movement in the centroidal point is basically the average movement of all points. You could also find the displacement here from the shape functions, because it has an x, it has a y, so you can use the shape functions of the big triangle to further fine-tune the triangle. I know this sounds a little bit crazy for other people, but I think my PhD and assistant professor people, if they watch this channel, actually know what I'm talking about. So, assuming you have a point 4 and that you know its displacement, you could, of course, discretize your structure or your element into 3 triangles. And here's what happens. If you discretize your element into 3 triangles, suddenly you have a dilemma or a problem. You realize to your amazement that point number 2 suddenly has 2 stress values. One stress value from this triangle, because the stress in the triangle is constant, and yet another stress value from this triangle. Each triangle has its own sigma x, and like let's say this triangle has a sigma x of 192, and this triangle has a sigma x of 200. Now, both triangles share point number 2, but what is the sigma at point number 2? Is it 200 from this triangle, or is it 192 from the other triangle? Now, if I want to be frank with you, I have no idea. We come up as scientists with different versions of how to deal with it. One of them is called global smoothing or smoothening. This is what Autodesk Robot does. Basically, point 2 has a stress of 200 from one triangle and a stress of 192 from the other triangle. So why not just find the average value? 200 plus 192 divided by 2 equals 196 or something. So the average could be calculated. Now, for point 1, you have 2 stress values. For point 2, you have 2 stress values. For point 3, you have 2 stress values. And for your amazement, for point 4, you have 3 stress values because there are 3 triangles. Now, this is how global smoothing happens, and I hope that I was able to scratch the surface of this deeper topic. So I think this was a small example, but I was able to dive deeper into it because it's our first example, so I want to get some facts straight. With that being said, and before I finish, I want to give a massive discretized triangle-sized shout-out to our dear channel members in the contributor level and the helper level, whose names are going to be shown on the screen. I want to thank them from the bottom of my heart, as the support of the channel is priceless to me and enables me to provide you with the videos that I want to do with a certain level of quality I try to achieve. And for that, I am of course forever thankful. I hope that you enjoyed the video and that it was beneficial for you. Of course, if you have enjoyed the video, then consider providing a sacrifice to the YouTube algorithm overlords by hitting that subscribe button, like button, share button, all the buttons basically, except the dislike button of course. And especially subscribing is important because it helps increase the reach of my channel. With that being said, and as per usual, this is the Civil Engineering Essentials channel, and we'll catch you in the next video. Bye bye.